Every morning was the same, as if time had stopped. Before the first ray of sun would sneak through the blinds, I was already in the kitchen, measuring the ground coffee, heating the pan, breaking the eggs as Mauricio liked them firm whites, no runny yolk. He never said thank you, but I stopped years ago to wait for it. Instead, I listened to the familiar rustle of his slippers upstairs, the creaking of the third step, the cough that announced his descent. My timing was impeccable. Breakfast was always hot, the pills organized by day and time in their plastic box, the newspaper folded next to his cup. When my husband died, the house in Querétaro became a place too quiet, too big. I had nowhere to go. No, really, Alma had her own family and her work in San Miguel. And although she never said it out loud, I didn't want to become a burden. So, when Mauricio said I could stay with him temporarily, he made it clear, temporarily, I moved my things and settled in. That was almost 7 years ago. At first, I tried to make the house feel like home. I brought my curtains, my recipe books, my sewing machine, but little by little, those things disappeared. The curtains didn't suit his minimalist taste. The books gathered dust. The sewing machine ended up in the garage behind toolboxes that he never used but refused to throw away. I stayed quiet. I adapted. I told myself that gratitude looked different in every generation. What I didn't say out loud, not to him, nor even to myself at that moment, was that the walls of my world were closing, room by room, until only the kitchen and the laundry room remained. My universe was his preferences, his routines, his moods, cooking, cleaning, running errands with a kind of perfected invisibility. And yet, there were days when he scolded me for using the wrong detergent or for reheating leftovers he didn't remember having enjoyed. I once mentioned how much I missed tending my garden. He looked up from his cell phone and said, "Well, you can do that when you have your own house another time." He said it as a joke, but the pain stayed with me. From time to time, I looked at the closet where I kept one small suitcase, just in case. I told myself it was for emergencies, for hospital visits or unexpected trips. But sometimes I sat on the bed, looking at it longer than necessary, wondering what it would feel like to walk out with just that. It was a thought I never expressed, not until the day when everything changed. It was just after lunch when the phone rang, vibrating against the counter while I was washing Mauricio's coffee cup. I saw Alma's name on the screen and something in my chest tightened. She never called during work. I answered with a cheerful, "Hello, little one," but her voice did not return the same warmth. "Mom," she said quickly, her voice cracked, "it's Sophie. She fell in gym class. She broke her arm." The cup slipped a little, and I clutched the edge of the sink. "Is she okay? Where is she now?" "In the hospital. She's with me. They already put a cast on her. She'll be out of school for at least a couple of weeks and, well, I can't stay home with her." I didn't hesitate. "Do you want me to go?" She sighed, and I heard the tension in her silence. I wouldn't ask if I had another option. The school evaluation is next week, and if I miss more than 2 days, it affects the renewal of my contract. "I'll go," I said before she finished. "I'll be there tomorrow morning." When I hung up, I stood still for a long moment, the weight of habit pushing against the decision I had already made. Then I dried my hands, went upstairs, and took the suitcase out of the closet. I placed it on the bed and opened it slowly. Just a few clothes, some toiletries, and my copy of The Wind in the Willows. Sophie loved that book. I didn't hear Mauricio come in until his voice cut through the air. "What are you doing?" I turned around. Sophie broke her arm. "Alma needs help. I'm going to stay with them for a few days." He frowned, as if I had spoken in another language. "You're leaving?" "Just like that. She needs me. I can be there." He snorted. "And me? Don't I need someone? Who will take care of this house?" "Me? Dinner? My medicines. I already organized your pills and left written meals for the week. You'll be okay." He took a step closer. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." I didn't answer, neither with words nor with tears. I just looked at him. Then, I turned back to the suitcase, folded a sweater, and closed it with the zipper. My hands were steady. My voice, when I finally spoke, was low. "I leave in the morning." The house was calm when I woke up, no footsteps upstairs, No murmur of the television in the living room, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the click of the heater turning on. I moved around the kitchen as usual, measuring the coffee, cutting fruit, preparing scrambled eggs. I packed Mauricio's lunch with the same care as every morning: a peanut butter sandwich, French fries, a small apple that he would probably leave intact. I left his countertop pill organizer along with a glass of water and a folded note. The handwriting was clear, the words short. Your medicines are organized until Friday. The meals are labeled. Don't skip breakfast. I didn't sign my name. Upstairs, my suitcase was already packed, but I scanned the room once more, just in case. A sweater, a scarf, the cream that Sophie liked when she couldn't sleep. At the last moment, I opened the drawer of the nightstand and took out a thin envelope, my passport, my birth certificate, and the small savings notebook with my name printed on the front. Below was another folder, one that Mauricio never noticed or asked about. It contained copies of an old deed and some letters that my late husband had written, the kind that reminded me I was once someone openly loved. I slipped both folders to the bottom of the suitcase and closed it. I didn't look at the room before leaving. I didn't stop in the hallway or on the stairs. I walked through the house like a guest leaving after a long visit. When I opened the front door, the cold morning air touched my skin as a reminder. Outside, the street was calm. My car was parked under a bare jacaranda tree, just as I had left it. I put the suitcase in the trunk, settled into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The engine roared to life with a buzzing sound. In the rearview mirror, the house remained motionless. No curtains moved. No shadow passed by the main window. I didn't expect a goodbye. I wasn't waiting for one. When I left the neighborhood, my cell phone vibrated with a new message. It was from Alma. Call when you're nearby. Sophie keeps asking when Grandma is coming. By the time I got to the driveway of Alma's house, the morning sun had already melted the frost that clung to the trees. The house was small, a single pale blue floor with a twisted wind chime by the porch, but it had a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Before I could open the car door, the front door burst open, and Sophie ran out with one arm in a pink cast and the other extended. "Grandma," she screamed. I barely had time to duck before she threw herself at me, her face buried in my coat. Her body was trembling slightly, not from pain, but from containing too much emotion in one small body. I hugged her tightly, pushing back her hair, whispering, "Here I am, little one, here I am." Inside, Alma gave a silent hug and helped with my suitcase. She looked tired, but there was relief in her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. That night, I prepared a lentil soup with the few ingredients she had, and we sat around the small kitchen table, our elbows almost touching. Sophie told me about the fall, how she slipped on the monkey bars, how the nurse gave her a lollipop. She smiled when I said that tomorrow we would draw happy faces on her cast. After dinner, I helped her put on her pajamas, arranged her casted arm on a pillow, and sat next to her bed with the book I had packed. Her eyes blinked as I read, her body inching closer with each page until her head rested against my hip. When her breathing became slow, I kissed her forehead and turned off the lamp. Back in the kitchen, Alma served me a cup of tea. "She's calmer now," she said, looking at her cup. "She's been waking up and crying the last 2 nights. Today was different." I nodded, wrapping my hands around the hot ceramic. "She just needed some comfort. That's all." Alma looked at me, her voice low but firm. "Stay as long as you want, Mom. We'll make room." I didn't respond immediately. I just looked around at the narrow counters, the cracked tile, the drawings stuck to the refrigerator, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was in someone else's house. Later that night, after everyone went to sleep, I took the folders out of my suitcase and carefully placed them on the corner desk. The next morning, I woke up before anyone else. The house was silent, except for the occasional creaking of wooden floors and the soft hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the small desk in the guest room with 2 folders open in front of me. The first contained the account statements I had kept secret for years. Small deposits, money from birthdays, leftover change from purchases, a tax refund I never mentioned. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. The balance wasn't impressive, but it was solid, a number that said, "You exist outside of someone else." The second folder took longer to open. I remembered the day I found it, hidden in a box of files after my husband passed away, a copy of the property deed, slightly yellowed by time. I had never read it carefully until recently, but it was clearly printed there, his name, only his, never updated. Mauricio assumed the house was his, spoke of it as if it were his. He used it to control me more times than I could count, but legally, he didn't have the full title. I ran my fingers along the bottom of the page where the notary seal once was. A part of me had been afraid to know what this all meant, but fear had kept me still for too long. So, I picked up the phone and dialed. Esteban answered on the second ring. "Carmen, everything okay? I need to ask you something," I said, "about property rights, about what someone assumes they own." I explained what I had found, the documents in front of me, the account I had managed in silence. I heard him scribble something in the background. "Carmen," he said, "you're not crazy. If your husband never transferred the title nor legally included Mauricio in the house, it may still be subject to the terms of succession, or at least part of the rights belong to you, depending on the will." "There was no will," I said softly. "He died suddenly. We never made one." "That plays in your favor, actually," he said. I leaned back in the chair, the weight of the years falling on me suddenly. Mauricio had been using that house as if he had inherited it. For all he said, Esteban continued, "You've been living in a story," he wrote himself. "Legally, he owns much less than he believes." I didn't speak. I just looked at the document, feeling something inside me change, not with anger, but with clarity. All those years of being told I had nothing, and here was the proof, silently waiting patiently. After hanging up, I folded both folders, put them in my suitcase, and closed it with firm hands. From the other room, I heard Sophie calling my name. It happened 3 days later, just after sunset. Alma was still at work, and Sophie and I had just finished folding clothes when a loud bang shook the front door. It wasn't a courteous knock, but the sharp, impatient kind that doesn't ask permission to enter. My hands froze mid-fold. Sophie looked at me with big eyes. "Stay here," I said softly. I walked to the door, my heart firm, and opened it just enough to see the figure outside. Mauricio was there, his jaw tense, eyes blazing with fury. He looked as if he hadn't slept much, wrinkled shirt, shoulders stiff with indignation. "You've ignored all my messages," he said in a low but boiling voice. "I know," I replied calmly. He took a step closer. "What are you doing here?" "Playing house, taking what doesn't belong to you." I didn't flinch. "I'm helping my granddaughter. That's what I came to do." "You abandoned me." His tone broke on the last word, more accusation than wound. "It's all been chaos since you left." "I didn't abandon you," I said calmly. "You needed a cook, a cleaner, a caregiver, not a mother." His face twisted, but he didn't speak. For the first time in our lives, he was looking for a script that no longer worked. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I'm not going back to a life where I only exist to serve." That part of my story ended. Sophie's hand squeezed mine. I squeezed it back. "Have you really changed?" Mauricio said finally, his words sounding more like a warning than a statement. "I didn't say I changed," I replied. "I just stopped pretending." He looked at me for a long moment, then turned and walked down the steps without saying anything else. I closed the door softly and locked it with a silent click. From the kitchen, the kettle began to whistle. I went back and poured 2 cups of tea, one for me and one for Alma, who would soon be home. The steam rose steadily under the soft light of the room, and Sophie rested her head on my arm as we sat on the sofa. Esteban presented the documents that Thursday. The envelope felt heavier than its size suggested when he slid it across the post office counter. Inside were the initial requests for the division of property and legal separation. My name was on each page, clear and well-written, not just a signature at the bottom of someone else's document. When we returned home, Esteban sat with me at the kitchen table while Sophie was napping and Alma was grading work. His voice was calm, professional, but not cold. "We'll start with the discovery of properties," he said, touching the folder. There's a solid case for financial contribution through domestic work, especially if there was no formal will after your husband passed away. I nodded. Mauricio's going to be furious. He already is, Esteban said. But that's not your weight to carry. Later that night, my cell phone vibrated. A message from Mauricio. Do you really want to air this in public? Fine, just remember who paid for everything while you were living under my roof. I didn't reply. I deleted the message and muted the phone. A few days later, another one arrived, this time a voice message. His voice was softer, almost pleading. Mom, we're family. We've both said things. You're being dramatic. Just come home. We can solve this. But there wasn't a home to return to, just a house built on expectations, not understanding. Yes, I lived under his roof, but I kept it clean, I kept him fed, I kept the walls from feeling empty. That was never nothing. Esteban spent the next week with updated forms. He checked them one last time before sliding them toward me. You don't owe him your peace just because he gave you shelter, he said with a firm voice. What you're doing now isn't revenge, it's restoration. I took the pen and signed. That night, after the house settled and everyone was sleeping, I opened a blank notebook and began to write my New Testament. It was simple but deliberate. I listed my savings, my share of the house if the court granted it, and the objects I wanted to bequeath. Alma's name appeared first, then Sophie's. As I turned the page, I tucked something between the pages, a drawing Sophie had made the previous day, 3 figures holding hands under a sun with uneven rays. One wore glasses, another had curly hair, another a cast on the arm. Scribbled above in crooked, bright letters was written, My True Family. I closed the notebook and stored it in the top drawer of the desk. My fingers lingered on the spine for a moment. The Old Testament never existed. This one did. The next morning, I opened the curtains in the guest room and let the sunlight bathe the desk. The final signatures arrived on a rainy afternoon. Esteban slid the last page across the table, his firm hand a reassuring presence. I didn't hesitate. I signed, and it was all over, 20 years summarized in a few strokes of ink. No one cried, no one begged, just a definitive silence and a strange, welcome lightness in my chest. A week later, I moved to a small rented apartment not far from Alma's house. 2 bedrooms, a modest kitchen, and windows facing the park. On Sundays, Sophie ran along the path with her backpack bouncing, her arm already without a cast, her skin healing. We baked together, read stories aloud, laughed. Sometimes, we just sat in silence, and even that felt full. One night, just as I was taking a loaf of cornbread from the oven, there was a knock at the door. I wiped my hands and opened it. Mauricio was there, thinner than I remembered, with grayer hair, his shoulders slightly bent. He didn't say hello, he just looked at me for a long while before asking, Are you happy now? I held his gaze. There was no more anger in me, just space. Yes, I said softly. Finally. He nodded once, slowly, and turned toward his car. I closed the door softly behind him, not with bitterness, not with triumph, but with peace. Some endings don't need fireworks, they just need silence. Later that night, I opened the drawer next to my desk and took out a manila folder. Inside were my new legal documents, my updated will, Sophie's drawing, and some letters I had started writing to myself, reminders of who I had become. I took a small desk label and pasted it on the cover of the folder. The year my voice came back.